Hey, and welcome back. You're listening to Crumbs of a Future, a podcast where I gather the soft, scattered crumbs of becoming, which I can only define as a state of being that I don't know too much about yet. This is episode 2, and we're calling it The Fragility of What We Foresee. But before we begin, I want to pose a question. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, I want you to go down to the poll section and answer this for me. Have you ever had a dream that seemed so real and vivid that it almost seemed like a vision of the future? But at the same time, as soon as you tried to exert your conscious will, it just fell apart. Which brings me to my topic for today. And I want to start off by talking about a dream that I had recently. So it was one of those dreams that you have towards the very end of your REM cycle and you're just about to wake up, but everything feels so real. And in this dream, I saw myself in front of this large peepal tree, which in other cultures is also known as a sacred fig or Bodhi tree. It's also supposedly the tree that in Buddhist cultures was a symbol for enlightenment because that's where the Bodhisattva attained his enlightenment, which seems really interesting considering the fact that when I saw this tree in my dream, it was all by itself and stood lonesome in this vast expanse of land that seemed like it was a forest, but it wasn't anymore. So from the tree were hanging these huge oversized leaves that didn't have the green fleshy part of the leaf, but instead all you could see were the wiry forms of the veins. And as soon as I would go up to touch one of the leaves, they would fall apart at my touch. And so I don't know what overtook me, but I had this epiphany, this urge to create some sort of preserving solution and drip it over these leaves. I created this mixture of algae and glycerin, and I was dripping this algal solution onto the veins of the leaves that hung from the tree. And I don't know why, but that tiny act of trying to preserve it seemed so profound in that moment. It felt almost prophetic that if we don't approach the present with care, the future could crumble in our hands just like those leaves. And I honestly woke up from that dream feeling so raw, but also powerful in the sense of perhaps having discovered a purpose. Which reminds me, I came across this reel recently which talks about the fact that most African languages, like Swahili, don't have a future tense because their philosophers have always believed that the future doesn't exactly exist or that it hangs in a delicate balance until it becomes the present moment. Sometimes it's not the vision itself that is fragile, but the socio-political or economical or environmental or even emotional states that make it so. And so, while it is true that the world right now is not a gentle enough place for fragile futures to exist, this dream helped bring me to some interesting realizations that made me understand that fragility could be less precarious and more intentional. My first realization was that fragility isn't weakness. Sometimes it just means that the thing is more precious and valuable than we realize and that it needs protection. But of course, intention doesn't always translate to impact, which is why the world is still raging wars in the most tender and delicate areas. But another thing that fragility teaches us is presence. Once we've realized the value in protecting life, human or otherwise, and all the factors that make it so fragile, we're able to pay more attention and be more present with it. Think about it. No matter what your stance is on current global affairs, The world right now has never been more united about the fact that certain human rights violations that are occurring across the globe are simply unacceptable. Of course, there's naysayers and fearmongers, and they're usually louder than the rest. But speak to your neighbor truthfully, and you'll see that at the core of it all, we all believe in caring for life, especially human life, but hopefully more than humans too. And so, fragility also reveals our inherent interdependence. Personally, I've had some incredibly prescient and profound experiences in understanding the difference between hyper independence, codependence, and interdependence. So, in the context of relationships, Google defines hyper independence as an unhealthy avoidance of needing others due to past trauma, characterized by rejecting help even when needed. Codependence involves an unhealthy reliance on others for one's sense of self and identity, leading to neglect of personal needs. And finally, interdependence is a state where individuals maintain their autonomy while also providing and receiving mutual support within a relationship. With that being said, in the context of life, we are, all of us, naturally interdependent. Whether you like it or not, we're all connected. That movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, isn't just some fantasy. But to be honest, if you were asking me, I would probably change it to everything is nothing and nothing is everything. I just love saying that to people to freak them out. But my point being, this state of realization for you might be a communal feeling, or perhaps the most lonely feeling in the world, depending on how you look at it. But the fact is, as all things, it hangs in a delicate balance. All of it is subject to your observation and careful attention. Another thing I've come to realize is that the things that thrive the most in this state of fragility and delicate balance are creativity and resistance. So, if I take you back to my dream, I can't say exactly what prompted me to conjure up that green algal solution in the dream to solidify and support the structure. Maybe it was this TikTok video that I came across the other day of this girl making delicate yarns made out of algae. But it made me realize that I was intuitively picking the most gentle way of protecting something so close to destruction, even if it was only to prolong its life a little more. Because at the end of the day, it was always meant to disintegrate anyway. But sometimes a single rebellious act of creativity is enough to share a more beautiful message or create a slightly better world. And what I realized from all of this is that the strength of fragility is that it forces us to care. It draws us closer, makes us hold things tenderly, and in that tenderness lies transformation. Fragile things break, yes, but they also make us a little softer. And softness, more than hardness, reshapes this world. And so, finally, I want to leave you with this poem that I wrote a couple of days after I saw this dream. The museum of my mind is finally worth visiting. Once its halls were rubble and echoes of leaving. Now the exhibits graze the floors, hung from above, a fragile archive of what it means to be loved. Step softly, every fragment on display once cut me open. Now they dangle like dainty glass. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you for making time to listen to me again. I promise to be back with more tiny truths next time. Jane.